All right. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Welcome back to Sculpting 1. I will be your instructor for today's lesson. Let me make sure. Yeah, it needs to be you guys. All right. Last class we talked about detailing our character. And this class, I want to address things like hair and then some of the props in the back and different things like that. All right. So let us begin. The sooner we dive in, the sooner I can get you guys this information. All right. So when it comes to hair inside of ZBrush, there are a lot of different approaches that you can take. All right, let me change my screen for you guys. I know you guys have been requesting this a lot, but there's a few different. Give me one moment to make sure my screen is full size for you guys. All right. There's a lot of different approaches that you can take to doing hair. There's the fiber mesh approach. Then there is this method that I'm going to show you right here, which is a mix of sculpting the hair and then adding some curve mesh brushes to it as well. All right. So for this method, you're going to want to start off sculpting your hair. So you want to mask out the parts of your sculpt that's going to require that's going to be the hair. So I'm going to the skull, right? Let me make sure I've got old buddy in place. Right, there's a few different reasons that you don't really want to go the route of doing fiber mesh for everything, just because your geometry count can get a little ridiculous. All right, so let me solo this guy, and you can see that he's not much to look at without the rest of his props in there. And all I'm doing to generate these masks is I'm hitting control on my keyboard and then using that to mask out what I need to. So to make sure that I can see what's going on underneath, right, you can not transparent, so you can go into your texture panel. Once again, your image where your reference view is, because I have my reference, I can reduce the opacity of my model, right? So now I can go in and really dial in, right? Dial in where this widow's peak is compared to where the rest of that is as well. So now I've got my hair kind of dialed in. I can go back into my my textures, and then I can bring this back to 100%. Right, so now I can focus better on this guy's incredible sideburns. For a zombie, he's got pretty good he's got a pretty good hair care routine. So he's got this widow's peak going on, and yeah, this is just to generate a base mesh that we're going to use to start to do our design on. All right, so now that I've got this guy going like so, I'm going to go into my subtool panel right over here, and then I'm going to go to my extract tab, and then I'm going to extract this mesh. And this might be good to go. Let's just give it a second. All right, that's pretty cool. That's pretty good. And I'm going to accept it. All right. And then I'm going to go to my poly groups just to make sure it does have poly groups in there already. Perfectly fine. And the reason that it's doing that is because I have solo on. So I'm going to turn off solo now. And now I can go in here. All right. And I'm going to go to my geometry. I'm going to turn off my poly frame so that I don't see the poly groups here. But what I want to do is I want to Z remesh this guy, and I want to keep those groups, right? I want to make sure that I'm keeping those poly groups. They really help me whenever it comes down to sculpting this. So I'm going to Z remesh it. We can do half. I'm just going to do adapt. I'm just going to Z remesh it at the base right here. And it's just going to give us better topology, something more manageable, something easier to work with. And that's what you guys really want. I'm telling you guys, you don't want very high geometry when you're trying to do things like this. So this is pretty good right now, but I think maybe we can go one step further. I'm going to do that Z remesh again. It's going to just clean it up just a little bit more, right? Just a little bit more. And that's pretty nice. All right. So I've got my symmetry on. If I start to hit shift and smooth, it'll smooth out the rest of these parts for us. That's perfectly fine with me. So we've got our good widow's peak over here. We've got this kind of, he kind of looks like he's got Magneto's helmet on right now, but that's besides the point. All right, let's get to it. I'm going to turn off my poly frame, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to smooth. That's a little too much. I'm going to go to my brush. I'm going to turn off from auto masking. I'm going to turn on back face mask, right? And then now I'm going to just smooth out some of this. Actually, what I want to do instead, I'm going to Alt Shift click that so that now, let's see, shift, my smoothing is a little too much. I'm going to reduce the intensity. There you go, something like that. All right, something a little more natural and not so helmety. That's a technical term, helmety, coined in 1772. All right, another thing I can do to make this a little easier on myself, I'm going to solo this guy. All right, just going to solo this guy a little bit. Now I've got our helmet kind of shape hair. All right, so the next thing I want to do now is I want to kind of start sculpting. So I'm going to go to BCT. I've got my clay tubes brush. All right. I control and shift, then click on the piece, and that's why I keep my poly groups in there, because this is now just affecting this. So if I do that again, it brings all these back. Right, this isolates just the top of the hair for me, and then now I can start to sculpt my hair. Right, this is a very lengthy process to do, but it's, once you do it a few times, you'll start to understand the process here. So I'm just gonna kind of give this guy the side burnies, right? All right, we've got the sides going. And this is going to be our foundation for our hair. This isn't going to be the hair itself, but this gives us a good framework for our hair that we're going to do, right? And I've seen some of you guys approach sculpting hair, and you guys did a good start, but to really get that the quality that you're looking for, you're going to want to do a few different approaches, right? And then just let's turn this off, and then right, just using this to kind of build up my base, right? Build up my base for the hair. And you can even still use the move tool as well during this phase of it. He's kind of got like this cool swoop going on there, so I'm going to want to address that. And for that, I'm going to want to turn off symmetry, which is X on the keyboard, and then I'm going to use my brush to kind of start to build kind of the swoop that he's got going here, right? Just building, right? Just building. right? The sides are pretty symmetrical, but the top part is not. So you want to just pay attention to the hairstyle that your character has going, and you want to build your mesh, your base mesh towards that. You know, like everything I teach you in this class, it takes time, right? You gotta give yourself the time to do it, right? So like I'm trying to build those swoops in there already, right? Just building in our mesh. All right, I'm gonna turn off solo, and then I'm gonna boom, like so. He's kind of got the pompadour kind of style going. He's got the Elvis right now. That's fine. All right, maybe shift smooth this out a little bit more. All right, shift smooth, shift smooth. All right, I'm gonna go to B, M, and V. That's my move tool. All right, I've got my move tool selected. Now I can use that to kind of prop up more of this guy. But I'm gonna, once again, I'm gonna go here, so I'm not affecting anything else. And I can definitely, right, because I want to match the profile of his hair. Right, he's got this, you know, I'm telling you, man, I don't know what your hair care routine is down here in the underworld, but man, you got something going. Might want to open up a hair salon instead of terrorizing people. All right, here we go. We've got something cool going on here. And then I'm going to use my BCT, which is my clay tubes brush. Right, and I like to repeat it for you guys just so you guys know what the tool is. I don't have no board on right now, but those kind of tools really do help. Right, I'm reducing the size of the clay buildup using my brackets, right, and I'm just going back and forth, right. You can see what I'm doing is I'm building up that mesh, building up that. And now what I can do is I'm going to go into my ZBrush tool again, right? Making sure I've got a decent base. And I'm going to go a little bit quick today, just because I want to get through it. There's a lot of information I want to get through, right? Like I always say, on yours, you're obviously going to want to do more, you know, more sculpting to make sure that your hair looks right, what you're going for looks appropriate, you know. All right, so I've got something here, maybe BMV for my move tool. Maybe move this part a little bit over, a little bit more. Give it a little more fluff here. All right, and then I want to Z-remesh it again. I'm gonna unhide all of it, and then I'm gonna Z-remesh it to the same. So now I should get something a little more cohesive, and I've still kept my poly groups in there as well. All right, so I've got a good decent base mesh here, and now I can show you this next part of it. All right, so you're gonna hit on your keyboard, right? You're gonna hit B, C, and you're gonna want to look for the curve tube snap. Right, this is what's going to start to get you some of those kind of hair follicle strand looking things. I'll show you what it does. I'm going to reduce the size of my brush using the brackets, like so. And what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to just draw on this mesh. And you can see the base of it, like you can see the idea of it, right? I can start to draw some strands on there. All right. But this isn't very hair-like, right? It doesn't have the swoop that you usually get with like kind of stylized hair. So what you're gonna want to do is you're gonna go into your stroke panel, and then you're gonna want to go into your stroke modifier, and then the size of the stroke modifier. And what you want to do there is you're gonna drop down this fall off, and this represents the start of the hair and the end of the hair, and this is the middle. So what I want to do is I'm going to increase this, oops, right, the beginning of the hair. I'm going to move this up, right, thin, thin, and then the middle is going to be kind of thick. All right. So now when I draw my hair, you can see I get that, right, that kind of shape. And then you can obviously, you're going to want to mess with this a little just to make sure you're getting, right, the best profile for your hair. Right, you can see that now I'm getting a very cool kind of, you know, that stroke to it. So now I can go in, right, using this, increasing the size of it to start to draw my hair strands here. Right, and you can see what it kind of looks like. All right, as usual, I've got myself a reference board. Right, I use PureRef because it helps me kind of catalog all of my reference, and then for that I can start to then build this hair profile on top of this guy. Right, going from kind of big to small, using that as my my template. So now, what I might do is I might divide this one time. Actually, let's do another Z remesh on this guy. All right. I Z remeshed it one more time. Right there, I'm just looking. I think I got a message in the chat, looking through. Really nice. Oh man, that's some really good looking stuff, man. All right, coolio. All right, I'll check that out here in a second, but let's go to our hair. All right, so now we've got a decent profile going here. So now if I draw, right, if I start to draw, I can get something like that. Right, boom, draw one strand, and the cool thing about this is you can move it around. Right, you can move around this strand if you want to. But another thing I like to do whenever I'm doing this is, right, I'll go into my stroke panel once again, and inside of the curve right here, I want to lock the start of it. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow it to act like real hair. All right. So I'm going to delete this lower subdivision here because it doesn't like that. Right. So now whenever, oops. Because that's where okay, so that's what, let me reduce that stroke. I'm gonna instead lock the end, because now if I do this, right, oops. Stroke. Let me move this to make sure it's working. So I don't want it. kind of want it to, I don't want the stroke right there. Oops. Delete the lower. Right, so now it's locked. The start of it, so it kind of functions more like real hair. And then when I'm done with it, right, and make sure that before you click off, right, before you you make sure you're done before you click off of the off the tool. And then I can draw another one. And then just keep going from there. And with hair like this, what you're going to want to do really is you want to make sure that you start to split these off after a while. So like if you do a few of these like so, you want to make sure that you split it from the geometry, because then what happens is, because you split them, you split the masks, you can then, let me move this. Ooh. What you can do is you want to split it so that whenever you decide you want to edit the hair by itself, the individual strands, it allows you to do that. So I'm just clicking off again. All right, drawing that. It's too much. And it's going to take a while, right, to do a lot of these. So that's why you have a base, right? You want a base there so that you can, variate the sizes a little bit. Right? Sometimes you're going to have skinnier hair, thicker hair. And then you can still move these to where, and it's locking it there, so. All right. So you're just gonna go through, right? Drawing your hair. Right. Obviously, whenever you're doing yours, you wanna make sure that you're kind of taking your time. Like I said, I'm gonna rush through a lot of this just because we don't have too much time in the class. And you can still smooth some of this stuff, right? And move them in place. This one's locked. It's locked the end point. So I'm just going to move it. And that's why I have the snap on, just to make sure that it snaps to the surface. I'm gonna increase the size a little bit. Increase the size of my brush, just to kind of get through some of these a little quicker. So you guys see the process. And obviously you're gonna want the follicles themselves to go into the scalp, right? So it looks more natural. And that's why you kind of build the bases, because you want something to essentially map these onto. So it's like the best of both worlds, really. As you guys can see, it's going to start to take shape the more of them you do. And then with like the sides, right, you've got obviously you can still move some of these, and then if you don't want to, I'm gonna go back and unlock the start and end points. Control allows me to rotate the orientation of it. Right, and some of these will be sticking out too, so like you're gonna want to, it's like a dance you're doing with the model, right? And that's why, like you guys see me, that's why you sculpt. That's why you sculpt it first. Right. I'm just clicking outside the model, right? Then, boom, drawing the next one, filling those in, right? All right, as you guys see, it's, you know, you guys see the process at this point. Right, you can start to really build these up pretty quickly, right? As you guys can see, like it doesn't take too much to really start. And then the cool thing is, then after that, like I can start to I can still at the end, I'm gonna manipulate, right, the base mesh itself to like maybe reveal some of this stuff or hide away some of this stuff, and then tuck some of these under, right? So that's, you know, that's really the process for doing a lot of this hair stuff. Is it takes a little time, but if you do, you know, if you take your time with it, it can be really rewarding for the hair itself. So if you don't click out, it'll just think you want to continue. Alright, I'm going to go to this side, and I'm going to start doing the same thing. Right, and that's, you know, you see how because I have that base mesh in there, it helps hide a lot of, you know, a lot of stuff it hides. And some people, you know, they'll make their own versions of this, right? They'll make their own curved brushes, depending on the stylized version of the hair that they've got going. You know, so that's not too uncommon either. You know. And the thing about hair is because of like how layered it is, right? You really don't want the same kind of strand. So like you'll go through one pass of this, right? And then after you've gone through your first pass of this, you're going to want to come back, maybe do a thinner version or a thinner layer and then a thicker layer, right? Because it's going to encompass how our hair kind of clumps naturally and different things like that. All right. All right, so now I can go, I might go back to my stroke, go to my curve modifier again. Oops. Go to my modifier again. Maybe do something where, because now I want some of these different, yeah, you see now I have a profile that no matter what end it starts, it looks like it's going in. So that's what you want for your next one. So the first one, you might want, you know, first profile, you might want one that's a little more like it's thick then thin, right? And then you want thin, if that makes any sense, to get that next layering, right? Because you're layering hair. Everything, you know, you guys are doing, I've been showing you guys, you got to layer. You got to layer your stuff, right? So now I'm creating kind of layer-based hair where it looks more full, more rich, right? Like this guy could be in a Pantene commercial if you wanted to. Pantene for zombies, obviously, but you know, Pantene nonetheless. He's getting that money. Right, and then you can obviously start to variate the sizes, right? Now I'm looking at the hair to see what's going on, to see if if I have any kind of crazy holes or anything like that. So as you guys can see, this process, you know, it's nothing too complex. It just takes time, you know. It just takes time. You're layering different pieces on top of each other, right? Whenever I'm done, right, I'm still, like I said, I'm still gonna have to go back in, smooth some stuff out, right? Right, there might be some wild wild strays going on. There's some stray hairs. Alright, so now I'm going back over, building myself something that's a little more interesting. Right, looking for some gaps that need to be filled. I'm trying to pay attention to where, like, you know how we talked about when we talked about different muscles, right? The starting and end point, right? Start and end. Things begin somewhere, they end somewhere. Right? That's with everything in life. You know, there's a beginning and an end. So those are the little things that you're gonna need to do for your hair to start looking more believable, right? And if I'd used fiber mesh, right, you'll notice that what the problem with fiber mesh is, it's just kind of it's hard to kind of do the hairstyles. Fiber mesh, don't get me wrong, is really good for things like beards, right? If you want to do some different beard styles and things like that. I've had a lot of good results when if I'm exploring different facial hairs and things like that. Fiber mesh can really do some cool stuff with that. But it's not good for overall the hair, right? It's good for experimentation, exploring. It can do pretty well with like grass and things like that. But for stylized more hair like this, you're gonna want this kind of level of control, where you're controlling how the hair is flowing, where it's starting, where it's ending, right? So, like I said before, guys, it takes time, but once you get it, it's pretty easy and fun to do. Right? And like I said, if I did want to continue it, I can do that, but I don't want to do that, right? So I'm just going to click off of it, and I'm giving it little strands, and I'm basing it based on the hair that my character has, right? So I'm making sure, right? And some of these that are sticking out, what I'm doing is I'm going back over and adding more strands to that location, right? So now it's looking more like, ooh, this guy's got layers of hair, which we all do, right? Some of the baby hairs in the front might be a little shorter, if you know what I'm talking about, So you're going through, you're adding, you're taking away, right? Right, he's got kind of like I don't know if that's a curly Q going on, but if you don't know what a curly Q is, it's the shit that Superman has on his head whenever he's Clark Kent. Does Superman have the curly Q, or does Clark Kent have the curly Q? I don't know. One of those, By the way, still probably the worst costume for a superhero. Glasses. I mean, come on, bro. I think there's no way Superman would not be known in 2025 if he was among us. I think we can all agree to that. If you don't agree, then I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, he's kind of got, whoops, didn't click off, so it didn't work. Now that I clicked off, it did work. All right. So now you're just following the hairstyle, the hair patterning, right? And, the truth is, for our render, since it's just going to be a front render, we're not doing like a back render, this might be fine, right? But what I can do to kind of speed this up is, let's do X on the keyboard, right? We can also use our symmetry to get us something real quick. And make it just a little bit bigger. All right, make our shape a little bit bigger. And whoops, actually let's solo this guy. That's a little too big. But you guys get the point, right? You guys get the point at this juncture. Once you start to get these things rolling, it's pretty easy to start getting something that looks interesting. Right, maybe we do like a profile or something, you know. We want to have something on the sides. Right. And what you realize is, like everything else, if you're doing the large, medium, small detail, you're going to start to get something that looks interesting really quickly, right? But you've got to give yourself time. You got to be patient, right? You got to, you know, be okay with it looking ugly for a while. I told you guys, you know, in every haircut, you know, that I've ever tried to have or grow or do, I go through an ugly phase, right? Models will go through an ugly phase, and then, you know, it'll start to come together, right? You got to be willing to go through that ugly phase a little bit. It's all good, you know, part of life. Not everything's going to be pretty all the time. It takes time to really get a foothold. So I'm just using that as a base, and then I'm using these to kind of do my coveralls, my in-betweens, my tweening. All right. That's fine. All right. So here maybe I turn off my symmetry tool again and just keep going. Look in the comment section. Nobody has any comments. Yeah, don't, you know, if you have any comments or questions, but you can put them in the comment section as well. I got that open so you guys can you know, ask away. Right, and that's why you have the snap on too, is just to make sure that it's always snapping to the geo that you have. Right. I'm just, you guys can see I'm just kind of building it up now. Right, these parts probably won't be seen, but I just wanted to show you how to quickly address some of this, right? And not doing it obviously would save us more geometry, computing space, because it doesn't have to render all of this shit. But for the sake of just going at it, that will do it for you. Don't say I never did anything for you. Let's unsolo just to see what we got so far. Alright, as you guys can see, it starting to come in, you know, come into a zone a little bit. And the cool thing about this is it definitely gives you the poly groups already. So if I'm having trouble with this guy, I can BMV. All right. Move this guy however I need to. Shift smooth. Get him out of the way. Boom. All right. I can still individually move some of these strands if I need to. And it does give us a good you can see what the poly groups look like for the hair. Alright. So this is a good way to really start to kind of build up your hair, build up that topology for it without going crazy with fiber mesh or something like that. So BC 9, I'm guessing, is the tool number for it. All right, still using my current profile. All right, and you're gonna want to test out different profiles for it too, because different profiles will allow you to do different things. All right. All right, so this is, this is probably good for now. I don't want to bore you guys to death, and you guys can see, right? What I'm doing is now I'm just adding like kind of smaller strands to fill out some of these portions using that profile that I created that makes it kind of look like they're, they start and end somewhere interesting. All right. Because we're now, okay, we've got like 30 minutes. All right, cool. I want to show you guys like what I would use fiber mesh for. All right. Just looking for areas that probably need a little filling. And because I turned off the symmetry mode, I get something that looks a little more natural, a little more realistic. And I know like what's happening right now, you guys are seeing is my OCD kicking in because like every time I see a space, I'm like, oh, that looks stupid. So like, um, yeah, yeah, I'm gonna have to just call it at some point in time. My brain will say, call it at some point in time. It still hasn't said it, but it will say it soon enough. And it's weird because I'm usually not like a super perfectionist or anything, but I do like the feeling of completing something. Just the completion is usually very satisfying to me. Like this bald spot is giving me anxiety right now, but that's okay. That's okay, because you guys get the overall message, obviously, hopefully. Alright, that's what the class is about. And you guys will be able to take this into your future endeavors, That's the hope, at least. Right? If everything doesn't stick, something will stick, right? Hopefully. Right? You guys can see some of it. It just looks like it's coming out of his hair, right? And that's what you want, I've got the... Right? And you guys can see, like, when I'm doing my... I'm making sure, like, I'm getting some swooping action, right? Because if I just do, shit like that, you're not going to get what you really want out of it. So you want to do a little, you want to add a little artistic style to it, Add your own little flair to it. Don't just up and down and think you can just, finish the project like that. You want to give it your own flavor. Yeah, it's getting too crazy. All right. This is gonna bother me. There you go. All right. So let me show you what I would use something like Dynamesh for. All right, we've got our hair in place now. So if I was gonna make like a mustache or like beard or something, like that's what Dynamesh would be really good for. All right. So now that we've got this guy going, let's solo it and make sure our mask is still not there. All right, so I'm gonna clear that mask out. I just drew a square. It clears out my previous mask. So like what I had this comic book project that I was working on. I'm gonna go BST. That's my standard brush, and I was one of my main characters had a beard, and I was trying to do like different implementations of it. So like I wanted to see what it would kind of look like, right? So that's what I would use fiber mesh for. Is like it's really good for things like that, where just to test out some stuff to see what it would look like. Maybe draw something like this, right? Give him the maybe the old Fu Manchu, something like that. Maybe give him a something like so. We'll give it a second for the computer to think. Something like that. Alright, so if you wanted to use fiber mesh, go to the fibers. Alright, you can do something. Whoa, that's too much. And then you can do fiber mesh here. You can do the modifier, reduce the max size, either increase the coverage, maybe reduce the length quite a bit. Looks like he's got worms on his face, but you guys get the point. Let's go fiber mesh. Let's go something like that. Turn off the light box and then reduce the length. Right, so it's good for like, right. Turn off solo, right. Now our character looks, like zombie Abraham Lincoln. So that's something like fiber mesh can be good for, is like fleshing out some interesting facial hair kind of things, maybe a little grass or something like that. And so yeah, that's that. But yeah, for our hair, this is pretty cool. And then the only thing that's missing right now is like, you see how we've got like some of these kind of strands that like the little stragglers that happen there, right? We can still do that. Let's get BC9 and then the snap. Oh shit, yeah. yeah. It's getting up there. Yeah. They just pointed out that we've got 81 million total points. So yeah, these can get really, really dense really quick. And what's gonna happen is with video game stuff, right? You're not gonna obviously use this. You're gonna take this as your high poly, make a low resolution mesh. Maybe your low resolution mesh for the hair is that base mesh that you do underneath, right? And then you'll project that, and you'll project all the high poly information onto that, and then you'll paint on that, right? So you don't really. It gets hard out here in these streets, these poly streets, and what's gonna happen is you're gonna start losing speed on ZBrush, right? You guys can see that right here. So you want to be careful. All right. And you guys can see even my frame rate's starting to be like, I hate you. And I have a pretty powerful computer too. Like I've got a pretty powerful computer, and for it to be like, buddy, you need to slow it down, it's pretty funny. Right, what I would do is I usually, like, if I'm doing something big, I'll layer them. So let me delete this one. My PC specs, it's pretty nice. Let me see if I can pull it up here in a second. Actually, let me finish this up, and then I'll show you what I'm running on this bad boy. Another thing that's starting to catch my eye is, like, I would like this to be like a little more curved a little back here. Yeah, something like that. It just looks too square. That's easy. That's an easy fix. There's something that just caught my eye. Right. Let's go solo. Turn off solo. Go here, and then bring these to match. I'm just gonna move these to. There we go. It's not so squared off. All right. So yeah, we've got our guy here pretty close. Do a BPR render and see what he looks like. It's going to take a second to do the BPR render. Alright, so the next thing we would want to do is then build the background stuff, the background setting stuff for our character. And that stuff takes a little bit of time too, but yeah. I'll try to show you guys maybe a little Z modeler next week, or yeah, I guess next week. I might just do that over the weekend so that we can get into painting, and then because I don't know how many days we have left on this. I want to get into painting, lighting, and then posing and things like that. Well, I already posed it, so painting, lighting, and then compositing. So yeah, that's the next steps. It's, it's pretty straightforward from here on out. This is like the fun part of it, right? The getting the base together, doing all that stuff, it can be a little daunting. But once you start getting into this phase where you're doing hair, you're doing lighting, texturing, makeup, things like that, that's the easy, fun parts of it, right? The hard part is making sure your base is good, because if you build a good base, right, it's easy for you to build everything else on top of it, right? Everything else will kind of just follow. So yeah, today we addressed hair, and yeah, it looks pretty interesting. All right. Does anybody have any questions for me?